Hey folks, welcome to the Talking Magic channel. My name is Youngjin,
And I'm Tristan.
and today we're going to be taking a look at Hour of Devastation and taking a look at the complete set, and doing a review of the rares, uncommons, and select commons for draft purposes. So let's go right ahead into the first color, Wooburg order, of course, with white. So we're gonna be starting each color by talking with, in my opinion, what the three best commons are for draft. So for white, coming in number three, we're gonna be starting off with a Mummy Paramount. So this is one generic and a white for a creature zombie 2/2. Whenever another zombie comes into the battlefield under your control, Mummy Paramount gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So obviously at the baseline, this is a very 2 mana 2/2 bear. Pretty generic, but obviously always gonna be good. But the fact that it can swing in as a 3/3 so long as the turn after you play Mummy Paramount, you drop another zombie is very aggressive and very powerful. And in Amonkhet blocks, so triple Amonkhet draft, the white black zombies was a pretty aggressive and powerful archetype. So long as you pick up the support, and that support shouldn't be that hard to come by, it should be pretty. This should be a powerful comment to pick up. Also, generally speaking, the white black zombies deck, if you knew you're gonna go into it and you could read the signals, it was pretty easy to get the strong pieces, mainly because a lot of the pieces that work well together are pretty bad by themselves. So if you can, focus yourself onto white black zombies and the rest of the pod is you sure aren't really into it, then you gonna get some really good pieces that nobody's gonna bother picking up. Next, we have Sandblast, 2 generic and a white for an instant. Deals 5 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is a reprint from Fate Reforged, if that's correct, right? Fate Reforged, I think.
Yeah, they were forged.
So this is basically an upgraded. What have we had in the past couple of sets? I think it was
Well, Battle for Zendikar, we had
Battle
Gideon's
for Zendikar. We
Reproach,
get
which
into
was a
approach.
very strong limited card. Sandblast, while you're paying one more mana and only getting one more damage, it's still pretty solid. I mean, 5 damage hits a lot of key creatures you want to remove. It's overall, it's for the common, it's great removal.
I mean, for the past 2 sets, 2 blocks in Kaladesh and in Amonkhet, we've had a 2 mana deal 3, which I've always been okay with, but a lot of the times, it is pretty underwhelming. It'll miss a lot. I mean, being able to only target attacking or block creatures, that's pretty normal for white damaging spells, but when it only deals 3 damage for 2 mana, it's in a lot of situations where it's just mediocre. In this case, similar to how Gideon's approach is 2 mana deal 4, is 3 mana deal 5, that's just, efficiently enough on mana that even though it only targets attacking or block creatures, it's going to take care of enough nasty threats that it's going to be very powerful, common, very high pick. And then finally we have Dauntless Aven. This is a 2 generic and a white for a creature bird warrior flying. Whenever it attacks, untap target creature you control. It is a 2/1. So I mean, this is a 3 mana 2/1 flyer. Not too bad. One toughness is, generally speaking, very poor, especially in a set where -1/-1 counters are just flying all over the place. But it also has pseudo vigilance, because when it attacks on the attack trigger, you can also target itself. And so it's almost like it's a 3 mana 2/1 flying vigilance. Of course, beyond that, you can also target your other creatures to give them pseudo vigilance. But more importantly, you can target your exert creatures, untap them, and they no longer are tapped for your next combat step or your next turn. That you can have a blocker and another attacker for the next turn that you can also exert. So this is gonna be, I think, this is gonna be a very, very strong, very strong early pick, especially at the common level. It'll swing in for damage over the air, and it'll allow you to get a really aggressive start with the exert creature. So this is great common. Okay, so now we're gonna go on to we're gonna be skipping over most of the commons, because outside of the 3 that we mentioned and any that we might mention in the main section of the review, most commons are just kind of filler. Your generic vanilla creatures or some mediocre combat tricks that you don't not really care too much about, won't have too much impact in constructed, and probably you won't pick too highly in draft. So for the start of the rares and uncommons, we're going to be talking about Adorned Pouncer. So this is a generic mana and a white for a creature cat 1/1 with double strike, and it has Eternalize for 3 generic white. So Eternalize is a new mechanic from Hour of Devastation. It's similar to the Embalm mechanic in Amonkhet, but in this case, Eternalize will bring back the creature as a 4/4 zombie always. So always a 4/4. Double strike on a 1/1 is bad, in my opinion. I think you would agree, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment.
But
Um,
mhm.
it's kind of like considering it as like 2 power, which, compared to other bears, it is, that's a fair rate. Plus, it has upside and eternalize, but that one toughness.
That one toughness is a killer. I mean, like I said previously, with -1/-1 counters going on, this is it's a danger to have any one toughness creature. Now in draft though, in draft it's still bad to have a 2 mana 1/1 double strike. But even when it dies, then you're just gonna pay. They lay it down on the road. You're gonna pay 5 mana to bring it back as a 4/4 double strike, and a 4/4 double strike is a completely different story. Now that is gonna be a beating in draft. That's very that's a very tough thing to block.
Oh yeah,
And if the opponent doesn't block, which they're gonna want to. If they don't block, they're gonna take 8. That's a very fast clock. Definitely very strong and limited. For constructed though, yeah, too slow. It's definitely just too slow. Paying five
yeah, I'd
mana,
agree with that.
yeah. Because like you gotta look at it like, would I pay 5 mana for a 4/4 double strike, right? And the answer is no. So, yeah, for constructed, it's a
Not
pass.
only you're paying 5 mana for a 4/4 double strike, you're also putting a 2 mana 1/1 double strike into your deck.
True,
Now,
true, yeah.
if there is like a good amount of discard outlets, like if there is some kind of white deck, maybe like black white, where you want to be discarding cards, that Eternalize does add value to that. I don't see a deck like that working out at the moment. I don't see the pieces in action, but if Adorn Pouncer sees play, I could kind of see it in those variants where discarding this card could actually be a good thing.
Yeah, but this
It
is
could
a five. This is a 5 mana creature that doesn't do anything on when it enters the battlefield and will die to a grasp or a push, which is
That's
just
true. I mean,
not the kind of thing you're looking for in a creature currently.
it has the most removal. That is fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next card, Angel of Condemnation, which is an awesome name. Uh, as with most angels on Amonkhet, it is a male angel, which is something
Very interesting.
fairly unprecedented in the
Yeah,
Magic
all
lore.
angels have been female. I mean, lore wise, they are female, but because this is Bolas's world, he can do what he wants.
He can do what he wants. And yeah, let me sell you this card. So Angel of Condemnation is 4 CMC, 2 generic, white, white, creature angel, 3/3, power toughness, with flying and vigilance. Ooh, 4 mana, 3/3 flying and vigilance. Ooh, tell me more. But it also has, for 2 and a white, and to tap it, you can exile another target creature, return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So you get your very own blink effect that can be repeated. You can save your creature from removal. You can exile like a blocker from your opponent, so you can go in for that damage, and then they don't get until the end of turn. There's a lot you can do with this card. The fact that it has vigilance, and that works really well with tap effects, because you can get that attack in and you can use that effect later, or you can use it while it's attacking. There's a lot of flexibility there. But wait, there's even more.
There's even more.
There's even more for 2 and a white tap, which is the same cost as the previous ability, so this can get a little confusing. You can also exert it, and then you can exile another target creature until Angel of Condemnation leaves the battlefield. So you also have an O-ring effect tacked onto this card, and all you have to do is just exert it. So
Now,
this
what was Sarah Angel? Sarah Angel was 5 mana 4/4, or was it a four
Sarah
mana
Angel
three
was
three?
a 5 mana, 3 generic white white for a 4/4 flying
Okay,
vigilance,
so
which
right. So this is basically a smaller Sarah Angel, which I would pick and draft all the time. Just
for sure.
if you ignore the ability, it's a 4 mana 3/3 flying vigilance. It's a very very strong card. But we got a blink effect, and we also have an O-ring effect on top of it. This is a crazy card in limited. This is gonna win games everywhere. And the
Oh
fact that
yeah,
it's
this
only
card
a
is
rare
brutal.
is crazy. It's no glory bringer, but this is easily one of the best rares in the entire set for limited purposes. Now, moving on to constructed purposes. This is it's still a powerful effect. I mean, we remember Eldrazi Displacer back during Oath of the Gatewatch
Yep.
standard. Saw some play. I always loved that card. That card was always sick.
Yep.
Now,
It's and
mhm.
it's one thing I also got to note. I got a note is that, with Hour of Devastation, there's a lot of tokens from the Eternalize ability. And when you exile a token, it's
Right,
gone.
right. Yeah, that's
It's
gone
gone
forever.
forever,
Right.
even if you just blink it, even if you're just blinking that token. So that blink effect is really powerful against Eternalized decks.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. It seems a bit slow for constructed, but it definitely, just the O-ring effect is a lot worse since it dies to common removal like grasp, like
Yes,
fatal
it does the
push.
grasp.
I
Yep.
mean, fatal push has to be procced with revolt,
Roll,
but
yeah, but I mean,
still,
still, that is a liability. So this is definitely too much of a liability, I think, to see play in standard. Like you said, too slow, and it also competing at 4 mana in white, with of course Gideon allies and the car. You can never escape that guy. So for constructive purposes, definitely too slow, but it is something to keep an eye out for. That's a very, very powerful effect, and vigilant and exert play so nice together.
oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, I love the flexibility of this card. You can save, other creatures from removal. You can, use its abilities offensively to, blink or O-ring your opponent's creatures. This card has a lot of utility to it, which is always amazing in draft.
All right, A plus bomb. Next card, another angel. We got Angel of the God Pharaoh. So this is 4 generic white for a creature angel, 4/4 flyer with cycling 2. So this is a pretty simple card. We've had other cards like this in Amonkhet's set. 6 mana 4/4 flying is pretty mediocre, below average stat line. But attacking on cycling makes it much better. Cycling as a whole makes a lot of these higher CMC cards, we're talking like 5 CMC plus cards, are much more playable in draft. In draft, you always have to worry about like these 6 mana, 7 mana cards. If they're just big stat dumps, I mean that can be fine in certain situations, but in most cases, if you're playing 6 mana, 7 mana for a card, it better win you the game. In this case, 6 mana 4/4 is not going to win you the game, but the fact that you can cycle it when you don't need it, and then when you actually have the mana and you can dump it onto the board, it makes the whole card a lot better. Of course, this is strictly, I'm speaking in draft purposes. For constructed, absolutely not going to make it. There's too much competition.
Just too slow.
Too slow. There's no way this makes any impact in the even decks that want a lot of cycling, like what's that, New Perspectives. I don't even know if it runs. Oh no, of course it runs white because it has the end game win game condition with the approach of the second Suns. But even then, this too slow card is not going to make it anywhere.
And cycling too, that is a big expense. The difference between a 1 mana cycler and a 2 mana cycler is huge.
Yeah, generally speaking, the strongest cycles are at 1 mana, but for draft, 2 mana is perfectly serviceable. When you're at 3 or 4 mana and you draw this card, cycle it away, or top deck it later and play it when you can.
It's a card I'm okay with picking, but I'm not too thrilled. All right, next up is Crested Sun Mare. For 3 and white, so 5 CMC, you get a 5/5 creature horse.
I love it.
Yeah. Wizards was not hoofing it with this one because for this mythic, other horses you control have indestructible. At the beginning of each end step, if you gain life this turn, you create a 5/5 white horse creature token. Now, for all you naysayers out there, a 5/5 indestructible.
He's doing it again.
Anytime you gain life is pretty insane, especially if you have any engine in limited. This card is a straight bomb. 1 proc from it is all you need for this card to be absurd. Even a 5/5 for 5 is, not the worst, but if you get 1 single proc, this card is amazing.
I mean, a 5/5 for 5 is very serviceable in draft. That's perfectly fine stat line that you're going for. But obviously making another 5/5 on top of that is absurdly good. Absolutely absurdly good.
I pity the person, since this is not a legendary, which disappoints anyone looking for a horse commander.
And all 27 horses.
If there's going to be a draft out there where someone gets two of these.
2 Crested Sun Mares. Oh my god.
And both will be indestructible because, other horses you control have indestructible, so they'll both cover each other. And that's just going to be stupid. It's going to happen. That's just, that's... What was that law? The law, anything that...
Murphy's Law? Absolutely.
Yeah, Murphy's Law. That's Murphy's Law. This is
Murphy's
going to
Law with
happen to someone.
horses.
Double Crested Sun Mare. Like, I
Horse tribal
guarantee
and
you.
draft. I can see that happening, absolutely.
Chances are it's going to be one of my opponents, and I'm going to be very sad.
So this is a pretty powerful effect in draft. Oh, well, okay, let's look at it at the baseline stats. 5 mana, 5/5. Baseline is fine, like we said, serviceable in draft. Now the question is, how often can you proc the life gain? If you look back at the draft format, triple Amonkhet, there wasn't really that too many ways to gain life. We had some lifelink creatures, not too many. I mean, basically the biggest lifelink creature we had was Glorybound Initiate, and that itself was also a rare. Outside of that, we have the Black Cartouche. Black Cartouche was very strong. That also gave lifelink. But then, outside of that, we have maybe some incidental life gain cards. I can't think of any cards that.
Well,
does give
there's
you
one
life.
in this set we haven't covered yet, but a God Pharaoh's Servant, which might be pretty decent.
Might be.
We'll have to see. Yeah, but the real question is that could this card see standard play? You know, is it sideboard material, or would you put it in your main deck? Huh?
Good God. Good God.
Huh?
So you.
Come on.
Oh no, I'm not gonna acknowledge that. I'm not
Oh,
gonna
come
bother
on.
to acknowledge that. The fact that you made that terrible pun. So,
Well, you know, some people have been speculating that this is the card that was actually designed for unstable. Stable? Come on, you know, horse.
so this card is for constructive purposes. We definitely have more powerful effects because you can ensure you have a more reliable ways to gain new life when this card comes into play. You can carve out creatures with life gain spells. You can also have stuff like it's 2 mana, destroy a tapped creature or attack a creature, and you also gain life. I'm not exactly sure what the name is, but it was a Shadows block because it had the modal effects. So you have a lot of potential for being able to drop this reliable in turn 5 and make another 5/5. Which is...
Are you talking about Blessed Alliance?
Blessed Alliance, that's exactly the one I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty strong effect. I mean, the more I talk about it, the more I want to try it out. Actually, the more I talk about it, the more it doesn't seem that bad.
Now it would be absolutely absurd, but in some part of me is surprised they didn't give this guy lifelink. Now I know, that'd be absurd. He'd be an engine on his own.
Too good. Yeah,
It'd probably be way too good, but I am partially surprised they didn't give this guy lifelink.
It would match, like, I guess, flavorfully, but like...
Or maybe a clause along the lines of when Crested Sun Mare deals damage to an opponent, gain life, or when it blocks a creature, gains lifelink, you know, something along those lines.
Right, something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that they make it so that you have to have some other card to create an engine for it. I don't know. I just think it's sweet because of horses.
It's sweet. I just love that Wizards of the Coast decided to drop random horse tribal in our Devastation block.
Oh, yeah.
And also, like, the only horse in this entire block, I'm like 90% sure, which is even more random, but whatever. More power to you, Wizards. I love you, crazy bastards. So, limited purposes, I think this is a not quite a bomb. It's very strong, but don't go crazy picking it first, because it might not... Proccing that second ability may not be quite as reliable, and trying to kill yourself picking stuff like Luxor River Shrine just to make sure you gain life is poor drafting habits, and so proceed with caution. And for constructed, I think we're speculative. I think this could potentially see some play. I think this is a powerful effect, dumping that much stats for 5 mana.
Yeah, I mean, Wingmate Rock was a very powerful card. I mean, much easier to proc.
Yes.
You know, this pumps out 5/5s, which, you know, is probably just as good, if not better, than 3/4 flyers.
You're right. It is very much comparable to Wingmate Rock. Okay, so the next card we have is Desert's Hold. This is a 2 generic and a white for an enchantment or an enchanting creature. When it enters the battlefield, if you control desert or there is a desert in your graveyard, you gain 3 life, and then the enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So this is essentially a smaller Faith's Fetters, which is 4 mana for a very similar ability. And this is absolutely premium removal unlimited. So long as you have a desert, which is potentially not that difficult. We have an entire cycle at common and an entire cycle at uncommon of desert lands, as well as other random deserts floating around. This is A+ premium removal.
I mean, even if you don't have a desert, this is a solid card the desert's just kind of an icing on the cake, and hey, it goes with that horse we just showed earlier.
Oh right,
So
I don't know why. Yeah, you're right. The desert clause is only gaining life. You're correct. For some
yep,
reason, I was so fixated on that desert clause. Yeah, even without deserts, this is A plus.
even without deserts, this is a solid card. I mean, you know, having deserts just makes it so much better for control because not only is it removal, it also gives you a nice little cushion with that 3 life gain. That's not irrelevant.
So yeah, this is a strong, very strong limited removal. As for constructive purposes, there's just better options for what you're paying for, especially
Yeah,
the fact that it's only an enchantment aura, and there
and it
is
is three CMC. In a format where we have fatal push.
yeah, it's absolutely right. So you just have a lot much better options. Also, cast out from the previous
Yeah,
set.
cast out's great as well.
Seeing a lot of play, especially for those more focused on white. So it definitely has a lot of competition. So now the question is, can a desert archetype work in constructed? I'm gonna be on the side of no. I don't think there's enough good support for it. But it is interesting. There are some very interesting cards that get much better so long as you have a desert in play. I'm gonna be on the side of it's probably a little too weak for constructed purposes. But we'll have to see what some people come up with.
All right, next card is Dhiru with Eyes Open. I think his name is Dhiru. I don't know, Dhiru.
I don't
I
know.
don't know.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but I've always pronounced it Jeru. Right, so the
Jeru?
silent D,
Okay.
say the J. But
That sounds good enough.
I'm not Amaketi. So,
the guy who's rocking the mohawk.
yeah,
He's
look at that guy.
He's 3 in white, so 5 CMC for legendary creature, human warrior. He has vigilance. He's a 4/3. When he enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a planeswalker card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. If a source would deal damage to a planeswalker you control, prevent one of that damage. And I gotta say, I feel sorry for the person who gets this as their promo rare in limited.
This is
Field.
This is a very mediocre rare when it comes to draft or
Oh
sealed.
yeah, because not only is it unlikely that you get a planeswalker, the only 2 walkers in Hour of Devastation don't share colors with it. You have Bolus, that's Grixis, and you have Samet the Tested, which is Gruul. So there's no white in there, so it doesn't share color. And this guy is 3 white, so that 2 white pips definitely means you need at least some focus on white.
Yeah.
And however, I will say this guy may see constructed play. I mean, the tutor ability is pretty powerful, but his second clause is not irrelevant. I think this guy's a little bit slow, but overall, I just think Dhiru is just kind of.
If he sees play, I'm going to be very shocked. I mean, the most I think he'll see play in is some jank kitchen table, Super Friends decks trying to run Call the Gatewatcher, whatever that weird card is.
I wouldn't count him out just yet. Mostly because like right now, like the only walkers in color he'd fetch, is like Gideon, either the Battle for Zendikar one or the Trials one in Amonkhet, which are both, fairly low.
Is the all Gideon's deck? Is the all Gideon's deck getting more legs?
No. No, I'm not saying anything about all Gideons. No 8 Gideon over here. But what I will say about the Dhiru, though, is that if there is some kind of control deck where you're going to play a big topping walker, probably not Bolas because this card is double white, but another card like maybe like a white-black control with, the new Liana. What's her name again? Death's Majesty?
Death's Majesty.
Yeah. Like, tutoring out a card like that in control is pretty powerful. If you get a bigger walker than that, it'll have even greater effect because Dhiru is 5 CMC, so that's fairly realistic to cast. You can only put 1 walker that's big in your deck, and then you can tutor it out with a Dhiru. That seems pretty solid. Do I think he will see play in this format? No, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's too aggressive. This card is really slow, but there is potential. I'm not going to write him off. But man, this guy is a boring card.
Yeah, I believe this
That's
card
what
is
I must say.
my assessment, this card is a dud on multiple fronts, both in limited and constructed purposes. I don't even know if I want to play this in Commander. I mean, tutor effects are always okay, I guess. Still. Uh, it is also a legendary creature. I don't know. Maybe somebody must make a mono white commander with super friends. Although if you, I guess the only planeswalkers you'd play would be like Gideon's. Oh god,
Or
color
Elspeth,
restriction
you
or
know,
Elspeth.
maybe someone's a big fan of Elspeth and
Someone
they just
just
want to
really likes
tutor it out
Elspeth.
every game. Yeah,
All right. Well, I'm thumbs down on this card.
yeah, I don't care for it either. To me, this is lazy design.
All right, next up we have Gideon's Defeat. This is 1 white for an instant exile target white creature that's attacking or blocking, and if it was a Gideon Planeswalker, you gain 5 life. So this is amongst a cycle of very, very, very narrow hate cards, which all have very similar effects. You know, doing something to X color, and if that creature was actually, or that target was a Planeswalker of the said color, you get Rider. These are so hilariously narrow. I mean, these are cards for the most part are built 90% for flavor, 10% for playability. Draft don't you're this is very tough card to pick. You're not gonna pick this card highly at all, because even though 1 white for an effect that can get rid of just any attacking or blocking creature is very powerful, the fact that it's only white attacking creatures, that's super narrow. Sideboard potential. There is sideboard potential for sure if you're confident that your opponent is in white. Which
Yeah, I
was
mean, this is
a
a
popular
card that this is a card like when it gets passed around in draft and there's only like 2 cards left in the pack. You're like, ah, hell, I'll pick it. I'm in colors and it might be a decent sideboard card, but yeah, this unless like we get to like a standard format where there is a deck to beat and it's it is of a specific color, like an example of Gideon's Defeat, there is a white deck that you really need to beat, then yeah, this is an efficient card. But I don't quite see it.
Well, let's think about these cycle cards is definitely much more interesting to discuss when it comes to standard playability and see if they have a home in sideboards. Um, I think the main enemy in standard at the moment is Gideon Alexander card. That's a beating house of a card. This deals with it incredibly easily. The question is it worth using sideboard slots for a card this narrow? So Gideon Alexander card is seen a lot in the vehicles decks, either Mardu or Esper vehicles, and so you can target Gideon. Other targets include Thraben Inspector, Veteran Motorist, if in the Mardu variants. The
Wait, hold on.
Exemplar.
Thraben Inspector. If you're using a 1 mana card,
Listen, I'm just listing off hits. I'm listing off hits here.
Thraben Inspector. I know. But that has to feel so bad. Thraben Inspector being that 1 mana 1/2 that gets you a clue. You're only destroying like half the card. I mean, I guess you're getting no. Well, you only gain 5 life if it's a Gideon Planeswalker. I don't know. I understand you're just listing hits, but man, that has to feel bad if you exile a Thraben Inspector.
Now, if you are a white deck that seriously has a lot of trouble with Gideons, this might be worth it putting in a sideboard slot.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Mm-hmm. So, as for constructed purposes, it's not actually that bad. I think there is a home in some certain sideboards where can be a pretty powerful effect. I mean, don't ever sleep on 1 mana exile effects. Those are or 1 mana spells in general. Those are always incredibly powerful.
All right, next up is the prettiest Yoked Ox I've ever seen. It's God Pharaoh's Faithful. It's for 1 white. You get a 0/4 human wizard. Whenever you cast a blue, black, or red spell, you gain 1 life. So this is an unusual card because it's white, but it procs off Grixis spells, like anything that's in the Grixis colors. But don't underestimate this card, because effects like this are pretty powerful. I do think being a 0/4 in a limited format where you have afflict as a keyword is kind of bad, because the utility of a 0/4 being able to block all the time, to help keep your life total up is usually helpful, but not so much in this set, since there are cards with afflict which you'll lose life anyways even if you do block. But I do think this card is standard playable in sideboards. I think it might even see play in other formats as well, like Pauper, where if you're like a white-black deck or white-blue flyers, this slots in very nice on the sideboard, because Like especially in white blue flyers, I could imagine this like holding the ground while your things in the air, like you're hitting in the air with cards and also gaining life. So yeah, I think this is definitely a playable card.
Yeah, strictly
Um,
sideboard.
it's not as good, yeah, strictly sideboard, not as good in limited, just simply because afflict is going to be a keyword that's going to be fairly relevant.
Yeah, we'll go over afflict when it
And
comes up in a
yeah,
bit. But yeah, in limited where afflict is going to be much more pronounced than it is in standard, which I would assume, definitely a less reliable blocker.
but yes, a very solid sideboard card for sure, and constructed.
Next up, we have Hour of Revelation. This is 3 generic white, white, white for a sorcery. Hour of Revelation costs 3 less to cast if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield. Then destroy all non-land permanents. So it's a, you know what? I'm not even gonna read the top part. This is a 6 mana wrath, essentially. It does
Yeah.
it does hit planeswalkers, artifacts, enchantments, but you are almost never gonna get that top of part to trigger limited or standard or modern or whatever format. I mean,
Except for Commander.
Commander,
This is going to be amazing in Commander.
you're gonna get that proc off pretty easy. But in more constructed formats, this is just not reasonable. This is not a reasonable card. You're never gonna get into a situation where you're gonna get the 10 online permanent unless you're also contributing to that, and in which case, then you're also a victim to this wrath as well.
I honestly think it's dependent on how slow the format is. In an extremely slow, like standard, where like it's mostly mid-range and control, I could honestly see this being a sideboardable card, just because it gives you a total board wipe. You know, it clears planeswalkers, enchantments, creatures, artifacts, any permanent that's not a land, it's gone. And there are control decks that would love having access to that. However, 6 CMC is so slow. I I don't know. Like, I agree with you. In standard, you're probably not going to get that first clause to proc all that often. But there is utility in having a complete board wipe. So I won't say I'm not writing off this card just yet, but it's not hopeful.
Yeah, it is a powerful. Planner cleansing, I believe, is
Yep,
similar.
planar cleansing.
I think same mana cost as well, same effect, pretty much destroy everything.
Yeah, it just didn't have that first
It just
clause.
didn't have the first clause. I mean, I'm sure there you can brew something where you can like say I don't know, make a ton of tokens, not a token, but make a ton of clues, etc. Something to put out a bunch of stuff that you don't really
that is
mind.
interesting.
You don't
Clues.
really mind losing, you know, for the most part, to get a incredibly cheap wrath. I'm gonna be on the side that it's not worth it. It's definitely not worth the investment. But yeah, like you said, it can be potential because planeswalkers are generally, you know, they are pretty difficult to get rid of at times. So yeah, there is potential for this card, but I think it's just much too expensive.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, next card is Oketra's Last Mercy, which is part of a cycle for most of the gods, depicting kind of their final moments before Bolas brutally has them murdered by his hitman. This card in particular, it's for 3 CMC, so 1 generic, 2 white, sorcery. Your life total becomes equal to your starting life total. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap step. So it's kind of like a self-exert. You know, you're not going to get to untap your lands the next turn. I personally do not like this card.
I don't like the entire cycle.
Like, we'll get to that later. And this card in particular, yes, it can be a powerful way to gain life. However, one thing, you know, life cards already have a big tempo loss because you're spending mana and a card to essentially do nothing that affects the board. This card compounds on that by making it so that you're disadvantaged in your next turn as well. And that is huge. There's a card in Eldritch Moon called Providence, which is similar in a way. You know, Providence was a 7 mana card.
Well, Providence also cost an intense. It had an intense mana cost.
Yeah, Providence had an intense mana cost. Set your life total to 26. However, it did have an additional clause where you could reveal it from your opening hand to essentially gain 6 life from the start. Providence is obviously a much worse card, but I think this card is in a very similar vein. However, if there is like a YOLO burn deck, this card is good against like spell-based burn. This card might be okay in Commander.
Well, in Modern, right, where there is a burn deck,
I wouldn't even want to play this in Modern, though.
well, let's say your opponent is just throwing bolts at you, and you fall down to, say, I don't know, 3 health, you drop an Oketcher's Last Mercy, you go all the way back up to 20.
Oh, yeah, for sure. However, this is my argument. For Modern especially, your sideboard cards are so limited. Yes, you can go for silver bullets like Oketcher's Last Mercy, which, are absolutely brutal against burn, but burn can also skullcrack you, because setting your life total to 20 constitutes as life gain.
It is susceptible to a
skullcrack in response.
Yes.
And that is not something that goes without consideration. If you want life gain, I would much rather play a card like Kitchen Finks. Yes, it's not as powerful in terms of life gain, but Kitchen Finks is also a very good card against like control decks, for example. And also coincidentally, they're the same CMC, so that's why I'm using it as an example. In Modern, your cards, your sideboard spaces are so limited, you need them to be broader. You can't really go for silver bullets like this, and burn, does have an answer in the form of a Tarkus Command and Skullcrack, and I just don't think it's worth it.
I'll give my opinion on this card in Standard. It's very poor. It's incredibly poor. Unlike Modern, where we have a more dedicated spell-based burn deck, in Standard we have nothing of the sort. In fact, burn is pretty sad in Standard at the moment. So in Standard, where you'd want an effect like this, where against the more aggressive decks, we have mono black zombies, green black tokens, Teamer Energy. They bring you down to a low life total. You cast Crested Sun Mare, you go back up to 20. Congratulations. Then next turn they just hit you again, and you're back down to 10. And you can't do anything the next turn because your lands are all tapped. This is absolutely no impact in Standard. And in Draft, it's also terrible. Obviously, I think it's pretty obvious how bad this is in Draft as well. So this is definitely very poor card. And would you say worst of the cycle? Maybe not. Yeah, I think maybe even worst of one of the cycle.
I think this is probably the worst part of the cycle. There is a red one that is also, in my opinion, pretty bad.
The red one is janky, but it has some fun.
The red one's janky.
It can do some stupid things.
It has a high end though, right. Whereas Oketcher's Last Mercy, its best ceiling, so to speak, is being against a spell-based burn deck and just getting a lot of card advantage from going from 3 life to 20. That's unrealistic. There is another life gain, which we'll get to later, that's in green, which is way better at 1 mana than I think this card is at all. So, this is just a rough card. I don't like it. I even think the design is kind of lazy, just in the sense that we've seen effects like this before. Having the self-exert on it doesn't make it much better. Even though it is, a lot more playable at 3 mana than it is at 7 mana, like Providence, I still think this card is just impractical.
Right. Okay, next we have Overwhelming Splendor. This is 6 generic.
Hallelujah.
This is 6 generic and a white for an enchantment Aura Curse. This is enchant player. Creatures enchanted player controls lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 1/1. And enchanted player cannot activate abilities that aren't mana abilities or loyalty abilities. So basically anything that makes mana or is a planeswalker.
This card is silly. This card is silly.
Absolutely silly. So this is basically, oh my god, humility. Yeah, humility. Which is a not.
I'm gonna humility all your creatures.
So this is a modern playable humility. Obviously at 8 mana, that's a ludicrous mana cost.
Oh yeah. This is a commander card / silly card you might use in like a jank deck. But in limited, if someone ever gets this off against you, it's just like, well.
I wonder how good this is even in limited, because even though it is, we always say it's limited, it's slower than constructed formats, and also it's kind of jankier because you're not playing fine-tuned decks. 8 mana is still a huge.
Yeah, 8 mana is crazy. But if you get this off, it's just like hats off to you, sir.
Your opponent will
You
be
know,
very, very, very
they will
sad.
be sad.
Yeah, this is an incredibly powerful effect, obviously, but the incredibly powerful effect with an incredibly expensive mana cost. So most likely,
It's a silly card. Most likely commander.
most likely it's a card that won't see much play in most formats. In constructed, in standard, sorry, it's just too expensive to see any kind of play. Now the question is, I mean, can there be shenanigans in modern? I'm sure somebody was gonna try to break it because this is the first time a humility effect is in modern, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure somebody's gonna want to try and break this kind of card.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Okay.
All right, next up is Saving Grace. It is 1 and a white for an enchantment aura, Flash. Enchant creature you control. When Saving Grace enters the battlefield, all damage that would be dealt to this turn to you and permanents you control is dealt to enchanted creature instead. Enchanted creature gets +0/+3. I like this card. I like this card a lot.
I'm medium on this card. I'm very medium on this card.
I like it in terms of design. How strong it is has yet to be seen, but I do like it in terms of design. It has flash, so you can use this at some pretty niche moments. You can, if a creature, like for example, goes and attack a planeswalker, you can redirect the damage to it. Or if they go at your face for a burn spell, you can switch it onto a creature that will then get, ideally an additional toughness that puts it out from dying. So you mitigate that. There's a lot of potential with this card in terms of strategy. Do I think it's strong enough for limited? Probably not, since it only gives toughness.
Well, what I see this card is essentially just a white fog. It is a white fog that also has a chance to kill a creature.
It's a white fog,
which is worse than a fog.
It stays around though.
Well,
I don't know.
It stays around in the essence of giving a creature +3 toughness, which is a decent boost. I mean, most likely the creature you're gonna enchant won't die, right? But I mean, it's essentially a fog that also has a chance to have a creature die, which is worse than any other fog, essentially.
And I think that's a fair argument. I mean, there are a lot of situations where this card's really bad. I think it's an interesting card in terms of design.
It's an interesting design. I'll give it
Yeah, I don't know how practical it is. And it is like a pseudo combat trick, although not gaining any power kind of hurts what most combat tricks are aiming to do. I don't really see this card seeing play, but I like the design.
If your deck is incredibly slow, and I'm talking limited purposes here, if your deck is incredibly slow, this can be a useful pickup only because the format is so aggressive that having a blocker with a high toughness can be a useful effect, even though blocking is so bad in this format due to so many creatures with powerful exert triggers. But important to note, this can also be fizzled if, when you flash it in and try to enchant something, your opponent kills the enchanted creature, this card just goes away.
Oh yeah, kill it in response.
Now wait, so when it enters the battlefield, all damage will be dealt this turn to you, and permanent control is dealt to enchanted creature instead. If the enchanted creature dies, and this is gone, the enter the battlefield...
Yeah, it's an aura, so it'll go to the graveyard.
Right, but the enter the battlefield trigger still happened, though. So the trigger still occurred. Unless I'm wrong.
But a creature is no longer enchanted, so I don't think it fulfills that second clause.
Right, but does that mean the damage goes all the way back to the original permanence, or does the damage just go away?
I think the effect just doesn't take place. I'd have to see what a judge says on that, but I think the effect doesn't take place, and damage would be dealt as normal.
Yeah, we would need a judge call on this, but I'm like thumbs way down on this card. This card is just bad.
Yeah, this card isn't good, but I do like the design.
I'll give it.
I think it's interesting. I wish it gave some power. That way it'd be usable as a combat trick. I don't know. I'm not too sure what I want from this card, but I like the space it's exploring.
It's very interesting. Next card is Solemnity. This is 2 generic and a white for an enchantment. Players cannot get counters, and counters cannot be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. So this is interesting. We're finally getting some pretty specific hate cards. I mean, Standard has been missing a lot of these more narrow hate cards for a while. I mean, obviously we talked about Gideon's defeat, but I'm talking more like, oh shoot, I went up. technical errors. Back on Solemnity. So obviously we'd be missing these powerful effects. These kind of effects comparable to the cards that I see a lot of modern plays, like Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage. They that target a specific archetype and really get it down. So this hurts. What right now in standard, this definitely neuters Teamer Energy, green black counters. It would have hurt Aether Wars Marvel if that card wasn't banned. It would have been very good against that. I mean, also in older formats, it randomly hits Infect. Well, not randomly. It specifically hits Infect. I mean, I don't know. What other counter strategies are there really in Modern? You're the Modern
well, there
man.
is Infect. I mean, did you mention Infect?
Yeah, I mentioned Infect briefly.
Oh, you mentioned Infect.
This is side.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of, small, like for example, Gemstone Mine, and you have other cards like that that have counters. Do I think this card will see modern play? Probably not. However, this card is pretty hilarious against that new Collected Company deck that tries to go for infinite mana. Like, you just play this card against them, that just ruins their combo. That's a
It
little bit
does
silly.
ruin the combo. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Because I didn't mention Company because I was thinking they deal with counters in a different way, but actually that does function exactly the same because they no longer can put counters on their Devoted Druid, and so they can't activate the mana ability.
You can't put counters on Devoted Druid because the cost of getting mana for Devoted Druid is put a -1/-1 counter on
so
it.
you can't activate
If players can't get it, right. You can't pay the cost, you don't get mana. So yeah, this card screws that deck over. But to be honest, there's a lot of good ways to screw that deck over. So I don't know. I'm not too sure how I feel about Solemnity. I don't really think it'll see play in Modern.
I think Solemnity is on the fringe of playable in both Modern and Standard. So in Modern, we have better options. So at 3 mana, is it is an ask in Modern. In Standard, it's less of an ask, but it's still generally speaking, you don't really want to pay 3+ mana for do nothings. Artifacts and enchantments that just drop on the battlefield and don't do anything the turn they come in. But this is a powerful enough effect that it can see some sideboard play. The question is, how powerful is that effect? Do you really want to use sideboard slots for it? Because there are a lot of decks right now running around that deal with putting on counters. This basically turns off any snake shenanigans using Constrictor to.
And it says GG to Walking Ballista.
Definitely, yeah. GG. Walking Ballista just comes in and dies immediately.
Yeah, you're 0/0. Congratulations. You trigger Revolt. I will say about Solemnity, though, for anyone in Commander who's playing white who really hates Atraxa, here's your card. Here's your card. Play against Atraxa.
If you play Solemnity, if I see random Solemnities in my Commander game, I'm gonna be so annoyed because it's such a mediocre card.
It is a mediocre card, but it is pretty fun against an Atraxa player.
Yeah, it is pretty fun. So I think there's a lot of sideboard potential on this card when it comes to Standard, because there's just so many high impact decks that rely on counters. I mean, remember, players can't get counters, so that also takes away energy counters. So the team
takes away experience counters.
Takes away experience counters for Commander, obviously. Yeah. So yeah, I like this card. I like this card mainly because it's nice to see that Wizards exploring more powerful sideboard options.
I wish this card hit Planeswalkers. I wish Planeswalkers was included.
Yeah, I can't believe it doesn't hit Planeswalkers. We really need more Planeswalker.
We need more Planeswalker hate, and this is a perfect card for it.
This could have been a perfect card for it, yeah. Unfortunate, yeah. I like this card, though. Very nice.
All right, next up is Steward of Solidarity. It is 2 CMC, so 1 generic, 1 white, for a 2/2 creature human warrior. With tap, exert Steward of Solidarity, create a 1/1 white warrior creature token with vigilance. This card is amazing. What a good uncommon. Although you're exerting it, puts it out for 2 turns, so every 2 turns you can tap to create a 1/1, white creature token with vigilance. You have to wait a turn, and then at the turn after that, you can do it again. This card is still a machine for uncommon. And it's a bear, so you're perfectly fine with picking it. That's a decent rate. I like this card a lot.
It's very powerful effect. Token generators are always very strong effects in limited. When you have a card that has an effect that can repeatedly pump out tokens, they're often undercosted in stats. This one is perfectly costed in stats. It's 2 mana, get 2 stats. You do exert it, so you won't be able to do it every single turn. But being able to pump out a token every other turn is a very powerful ability. Something that you're going to want to pick. It's a high pick in draft. Absolutely. Can this see play in standard?
I think it's a bit too slow, but I don't know. Maybe there's a good token strat on the horizon.
I mean, green white tokens isn't completely dead. It is still an archetype that has potential. It's not like it lost too many cards, well, in rotation. I mean, this does allow you to constantly create tokens. Not quite like Nissa, where you can drop it and make a token every turn, but this is also a token that has toughness inherently and also has a keyword in vigilance. So there might be, I think, you can make a good token strategy. Maybe even you also have Ormondal. What's the actual land card name? Westvale Abbey.
Ormondal, it's Westvale Abbey.
We also saw Westvale Abbey, so the fact that Westvale Abbey is in the format means tokens also have that much more potential, to have very powerful end game with Ormondal or close out a game really. Yeah, I like this card. This card is very powerful, definitely.
And we do still have Trial of Solidarity, which is a powerful card with tokens as well.
Trial of Solidarity hasn't seen any play, but those kind of effects are definitely powerful so long as you have a white board, obviously.
Well, isn't there some white card that has like buff that's seeing play right now?
A white card?
Maybe it's not Trial.
Well, right now the white decks that are seeing play don't really do that kind of, there's not really that kind of play.
Yeah, but there's one towards the start of this format that was seeing play occasionally. I can't recall the name of the card at the top of my head. I'm not the resident standard player, but I could have swore there was some white group buff spell that was sort of seeing play.
I'm unsure as to what you're talking about, but I will do research and pop it up on the screen maybe later.
Or you can edit this out if it doesn't exist.
That's an option too. I'll keep that in mind. Alright, next card is Sunscorched Champion. This is 2 generic and a white for a human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to its power, and you can eternalize it for 2 generic white. Discard a card, so discarding a card is part of its cost. Bring it back as a 4/4, which obviously gains you life equal to its power, so you gain 4 life. This is a very good card. This is a very fine card. 3 mana, 2/3 is below average, but gaining you 2 life is pretty nice rider. But then you can later play 4 mana, and obviously with the extra cost of discarding card, but you get a 4/4 for the 4 mana and 4 life. This is gonna be a very good card to stabilize you against aggro decks. Comparable to Kitchen Finks that sees play in Modern.
Yeah, I mean, this is a budget Kitchen Finks. You obviously don't get the advantage of it coming back right away. You have to invest both a card and additional mana for that to happen. But, that is a lot of burst life gain with 4/4 coming back. This card is really solid. A 3 mana 2/3 that gains you 2 life when it enters the battlefield is good enough for limited purposes most of the time.
I mean,
it's not an unfavorable rate. Plus, it has an advantage in that you get a 4 mana 4/4 that gains you 4 life later on. You can turn extra land into that card. So yeah, there's a lot of utility to this. I think it's a good card.
I mean, the great part about a budget Kitchen Finks is that there is no Kitchen Finks in standard. So
that's true.
I think this is a good card to stem the bleeding against aggro decks. I mean, when you look at eternalized costs, for the most part, they're pretty expensive. Not crazy expensive, but the fact that you're always going to be getting a 4/4. They're often its eternalized cost is overcost. It's because you're getting a card back from the graveyard, so they're always going to be careful with that cost. But because they ride a discarded card, into the casting cost, they can keep that casting cost low on the eternalized, so you can get a very cheap eternalized creature. So pay this on 3 mana, gain 2 life, block a creature, do it again. The next turn, 4 mana, discarding a card, get a 4/4, much better blocker and 4 life. This is a very good stabilizer against aggro decks.
Now, the reason this card is no Kitchen Finks is because when you eternalize it for 4 mana, you are discarding a card, so you're never getting card advantage from this, really. You're just always at card parity. Sometimes you can turn a land that you don't need into this, into the eternalized, the 4/4, but, not being able to get card advantage against a control deck's removal is significant enough for me to mention. that's the main reason this is no kitchen things.
Alright, let's move on to the next card.
All right, next card is Unconventional Tactics. 3 CMC for 2 generic and a white. Sorcery, target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. Whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay white. If you do, return Unconventional Tactics from your graveyard to your hand. What an aggressive and boring card.
I mean, I kind of like it. I find the whole flavor of the card pretty funny. It's a bunch of zombies walking off a plank, and every time another zombie comes in, you could bring it back because another zombie's falling off and it's flying.
It's kind of silly. I mean, you can hit hard. You can hit really hard with this card. It reminds me in a lot of ways of a card from Shadows over Innistrad called Griff's Boon, in the sense that it is a repeatable form of flying with a buff. Although, Griff's Boon was an enchantment, and this is just sorcery. This card's powerful. If you're playing a lot of zombies, this is a very aggressive, very get them dead card. However, I just think that having to pay 3 mana over and over again is probably not worth it. But if you do have a lot of zombies, if you manage to draft a very solid white-black zombie deck, I think this card is fine. This card is actually really good. You can kill your opponent really fast.
See, I think I'm higher on this card than you are. I think this card has a lot of potential in draft. When you're getting a zombies train going, being able to give a zombie or any creature really +3/+3 and flying, that really gets your opponent dead really quick, and over and over and over again. So long as you can keep that zombies going, I think this can really be a beating in limited. I think
it's fast, but you're gonna have to keep paying 3 mana every time, plus the white to get it back. That seems like too much of payment to me.
3 mana every turn for a 3/3 haste flyer, right? So long as your opponent can't block, which is powerful. No, I mean, it's a 3 mana 3/3 haste.
That's powerful.
It's a 3 mana 3/3 haste flyer plus the base power from the card that you're giving the buff to. So
I think it's more comparable to like 4 mana, just because you are going to have to pay that white to get it back that second time. It will get your opponent dead quickly if you have enough zombies. If you have enough zombies, this card's great. But if you don't have that many zombies, I would not pick this card.
Obviously, if you're not in a zombie tribal deck, you're not going to pick this card highly. But paying 3 mana for not paying 3 mana, paying a card at sorcery speed for this kind of effect is unfavorable. So if you can only do it, if you're only reliably going to expect to do this once, then obviously ship it. But in a dedicated zombie deck, I like it. This is a very powerful effect.
I just think it's way too much investment. Way too much mana investment.
I think it's a fine mana investment. Okay, next up, this is the last white card. This is Vizier of the True, 3 generic and a white for a creature human cleric. This is a 3/2. You can exert Vizier of the True as it attacks, and whenever you exert a creature, tap target creature an opponent controls. This is a very strong limited uncommon. I mean, being able to tap down a troublesome blocker. If your opponent manages to put down a good blocker, you can just you can exert Vizier, tap down that blocker, and suddenly your team is swinging in for a lot more damage. Very strong, especially when you consider the draft format that this is going into. This is going into a draft format where Boros aggro decks are so good. This just pushes them over the top, for the most part. Very strong effect, being able to tap down and take away a blocker.
Yep, and I like that the second clause doesn't have to trigger just off itself. You can exert any creature.
Yeah.
And you can tap a creature.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a whole row of exert creatures, tap down an entire board, enemy swing in for the team. This is incredibly powerful and common.
Solid card.
I think, but of course, in the sphere of limited, when we move into constructed standard, this is just weak 4 mana for
too weak of a body. Yeah,
exactly. Too weak of a body to actually make an impact. And then once again, we're at 4 mana, so we're in Gideon land. We're in the land of the Gideons.
The land of the Gideons.
All right. Okay, that's it. That's it for white. We're now gonna go into blue portion of our set review.